Hey everybody, I'm Doug.
And I'm Pat.
Welcome back to the show. You know, Pat and I, we just got back from a road trip, which is what the name of this show's called, is the road trip. And it's also, because it's the 20th of November today, 2014, it's the second anniversary of the post of the first show.
Boy, it's been that long.
I know.
Oh.
So this will be the 16th show, which seems to me like that's a lot of shows, but we are sort of, I don't know what we are, but we're not, we're doing the best we can. Yeah, we get tired out.
The best you can with what you have to work with. You know?
Let's talk about this road trip. This road trip idea got started because I was going to San Francisco to pick up a vintage Ludwig drum set that I was inheriting from a good friend that passed away. It's a 1963 four-piece Ludwig with original Zildjian cymbals and cases, which is really cool. You know, you can sort of relate the age of that drum kit, 63, to guitars. Like me and Martin guitars, like, you know, if you get into the production of guitars, and you look at Martin guitar production before Bob Dylan, in that folk boom, 62, 63. In 1964, in February 1964, the Beatles, they played on the Ed Sullivan Show, and Ringo was playing Ludwig drums. And so for the drummers out there, just like vintage guitar player guys, pre-Ringo means that those drum kits were made when the production was very low. And that's what this kit is. After that, Ludwig started making drum kits 24/7.
So pre-Ringo, would those be best?
Trivia.
There you go.
The trivia.
Yeah.
If you all get what Pat just said, good for you.
It's pretty deep.
Yeah. But it's true. It's correct.
Yeah.
That is correct. And it's kind of the same for guitars, because pre-1964, the amount of guitars that were being produced was quite a bit lower than right after that because of the boom. So it's a kind of a parallel thing. So it goes on with what we're doing. So anyway, I was going to go down to San Francisco and get that drum kit. And then Pat and I were talking about, you know, since you're not doing much, maybe you'd want to go too.
I fit it in my busy schedule.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's appreciated.
I took some time off.
Brought your camera.
Brought my camera.
Brought a little extra load of tobacco for your
That's
pipe.
right.
And
That's
we
right.
headed south. So we live in Portland, Oregon, and so we headed south. We thought what we would do is we would hit some music stores that deal with vintage guitars, kind of a little bit of a rarity these days, and see what they had and talk with them and see how business is and see what's going on.
Yeah. We stopped in Eugene,
Yeah.
which is about 100 miles south of Portland, and talked to Artie at McKinsey River Music and checked out his inventory. And nice guy, nice folks there, and a lot of cool guitars
That you can see
guitars.
hanging there, and then you can even play on them.
Play them. That's
Yeah.
right. That's
So for a lot of guys who've never had an opportunity to play some really nice vintage guitars, not just because they're vintage, but because they're cool. They're a different thing, just like that drum set. Then we headed south from there.
South from there, made it down to Grants Pass, where we went to the music shop, owned by Pearl Jones. And
There's a picture of you and Pearl right here.
yeah, Pearl's just a sweetheart, you know, and she's she's a legend in the Northwest, and has quite a few vintage guitars, different things, mandolins, banjos, and who knows what else Pearl has tucked away. But she's an awful sweet gal and been a good friend for many, many years.
Yeah.
So, I think it's the first time you've met her, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Been hearing about her forever. She's a legend in Oregon, probably all over the place, really.
Probably.
Yeah.
And she's sold instruments to everybody all over the world. So, and been doing it since I think, I think since '62 is when she opened her store. So it's been a while.
Yeah. So then we were going to head on down to San Francisco, and then after San Francisco, we were going to go to Rumble Seat Music in Carmel, which is a couple hours, maybe at the most, south on the coast there.
Yeah.
If you're not familiar with Rumble Seat Music, you should just Google them and look them up. They kind of gave us an invite. Pat called them up and gave us an invite to come on by and bring a camera in and check out their stuff, which we did, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But at the same time, you know, we've been talking about independent pickup winders and inviting them to send their product to us if they think that they've got something that they want to go up against Oscar or the 60 Burst. And we've been getting killer response from those guys. And one of them is a guy named Bob Tyson from Tyson Tone Works, who's in Salinas, California. So Bob got in touch with us. He said, I just started winding humbuckers. I'm an independent winder, and usually wind P90s. And I'm going to send you a set of humbuckers and see what you think. And we chatted a little bit via email, which is kind of, you know, the thing we're talking about. Because, well, we don't really have that much response from the big guys, do we?
Not at all. Not at all. I don't know. The small independent guys are really where it's at for me.
Yeah, and so we like their attitude, and so they're sending us stuff to check out to go against the big guys, which are the old Les Pauls. So anyway, Bob sends us some humbuckings, which I put in our test guitar, one of our test guitars, the Heritage right here, and dang, they sound pretty good.
They sound real good.
Yeah,
they sound very good.
Yeah, and he also said, you know, you guys could, I could come up there with my winding stuff and I could sit down and I could show you how it's done. That's, because I don't know. I don't have any idea. What happened? I mean, really, how do you make these things? What difference is it that goes in there? I know the basic stuff, but, so anyway, he lives in Salinas, California, which is just almost straight over from Carmel.
Right.
So we added him to the road trip, and we went down there and filmed him winding pickups, and so that's our road trip. So that's all pretty cool. Here's these Bob's pickups. They're they don't have covers on them, but I think that they sound probably pretty much like they would if they did have covers on them. The thing I like about them is I like the clarity and the top end on this guitar. He put some top end onto this guitar that it did not have before, but clear sound. Especially up here. His neck pickup is cool too. It actually had some pretty good definition to it. I hate to play jazzy stuff because I know it really upsets you quite a bit, but this is through the Vox, of course. Killer for blues stuff. We're going to have these Tysons, and along with a lot of the other independent winders in another pickup show that we have coming up. So we'll load them into the various guitars, and we will compare them with Oscar and with Jane. And so we have a chance to really explore this. So we had our trip planned out, and we headed off, and we hit San Francisco. Here's a cool picture of Doug enjoying San Francisco. Thanks for the photo, Pat.
That's right.
And then we headed south. And we got down with Bob, and when we got down there, we talked about guitars and stuff. And the main question we wanted to ask him was, what got you into wanting to wind pickups? And what is kind of your philosophy of winding pickups? What's your goal? What are you looking for? And how does it feel like, you know, to when you're talking with a guitar player, people who are communicating with him, to change the wind, to change some of the elements of it, and to make it predictable when he does it, so that if he comes up with something that's really great, that he can do it again. which it seemed would be important. Man, we learned a lot.
A lot.
We really learned a lot. So
A lot. Nice guy. And family, nice family. I mean, I can't say enough good about
it was a
about
great
that whole
experience. It was really great. And really got me thinking a whole bunch also because he does these P90s. He had a set of P90s and a Les Paul there that belonged to his friend Charles. Hey, Charles. That sounded amazing. So we're gonna go and do a show on P90s also, and the old Gibsons and new stuff, and have some winders. They were going to send us some P90s. Just exciting stuff.
What is this pickup wound at?
This one is wound at 7.6.
Okay.
And this one's probably just about that. He wound an original one which was a little over 8, and it sounded fabulous. And I asked him if he could wind it back a little bit just to see what it would do. And that's what he's doing during this show. He's actually winding the rest of the coil, and then he put it together so we could see how they go together. And then we put it in this guitar and we played it.
This is the final product.
Yeah.
So what you'll see is from the very beginning of an empty bobbin to a finished guitar pickup that is Doug actually soldered it in himself.
I soldered it in.
And it works.
Yeah. Okay, here's Bob Tyson talking about why he does it.
You know, one of the things for me was I started out, I wanted more responsiveness and some different sounds from the guitars that I had. And so I started changing potentiometers and capacitors, and then I started changing pickups and some different amplifiers, and I wasn't quite getting exactly where I wanted to be, and I wanted to be able to have some more control over the tones that I could get besides my playing and all those things. And I had bought a pickup that the wiring was kind of messed up when I took the cover off. It ripped some of the coil, the magnet wire off of it, and I contacted somebody. Yeah.
Was it your pickup?
No, it wasn't.
Oops.
Right. So somebody converted it from vintage braid to four conductor, and then when they did that, they didn't put the 1/2-inch tape around it to protect it, so it wasn't covered, and so I pulled the cover off gently. It just ripped it off. And fortunately, it was the end wire. And then I contacted somebody, a maker. I said, "Hey, you know, can you help me out here? I think I should be able to do this." And I knew how to solder from changing pots and stuff. And he said, "Oh, if it's the end, all you do is just solder that, and you just put the hookup wire back on there." And I did, and then it worked, and I said, "Hey, well, I can do this."
So far, so good.
Yes, and then
And it worked, obviously.
And it worked. And then I started researching on different forums and stuff about pickup making, and there's quite a bit of information, and on a number of forums, and I kept a notebook of information about machines and what different people were doing, and little tidbits, and started watching eBay for these machines, and you know, what could I use and what could I make. So I started like just about everybody else does, which is hand winding, and people call it scatter winding, all this other things. And so at the very least, it's a great place to start. You could do it on the side of a sewing machine or whatever with a counter. And I was originally going to make a machine with servo motors, and then so it could be controlled, so I could have consistency, figure out what I wanted to do, program this machine to do it. And then I found this hand-guided winder that I bought. And figured out how to do it, and it was very difficult for me to from pickup to pickup to pickup to make a bunch that were kind of consistent. Somebody says, "Hey Bob," for a second I'm looking over here, and then all of a sudden it's not exactly the same. So I wanted to have a bunch of consistency, and
That's Bob's dog that eats ice cubes.
and that's Lily. That's Lily. And then so I also, at the same time, that there's lots of different ways to do this successfully, have an appreciation for old machines, and I really wanted to get some original machines, so I was kind of keeping my eyes open for some of these. And then with my hand winder, I did some modifications so that the tension would be the same, and then I wasn't actually using my hand anymore to grab the wire, and I made this little this little jig that it would go back and forth, so that it was
Because
like,
that wire is like a hair.
it's very thin. And then so I wanted to do that, and then this machine right here became available.
What is this? What's it called?
This is a Coeco, which is short for a coil winding equipment company out of Oyster Bay, New York, which is close to where I grew up. And then this is from the early 60s, and I've got another one from the late 50s, and this uses cams and gears, and you can't really see it, but we'll see later, that controls the traverse, and the turns per layer, and all that stuff, so that it's, one thing that's cool is it's old, which I think is cool, and the other thing is that I can get it dead on exactly the same.
So you can get
every time.
predictability. So if
Predictability.
you wind something and it's killer diller and it really works, you can do it again.
I can do it again. And like lots of guys, I go by total number of turns versus DC resistance. So the DC resistance can change a little bit from batches of wire and so on and so forth. But using this machine really enables me to have a lot of consistency, which for me is very important. And then the other thing I'll just touch on really quick with this idea of scatter winding.
Yeah, right.
You know, which everybody uses.
Right.
Versus hand wind, and then some people also call it hand winding. You know, with this oblong bobbin and with it spinning anywhere from say 600 to, there you go, there's one right there, to say 1200 RPMs, and that wire is so thin, everything's going to be scatter wound a bit. Nothing's going to be laid down exactly the same unless you go in like this, and then even then I don't know if it's going to stay. So everything is to some extent scatter around. There is going to be a little bit of inconsistency from a little bit, just a little bit, but at the same time, as much consistency as possible.
Yeah.
And then so, you know, people talk about hand winding's better than machine winding, and then people say, well, PS were wound with the machine, so they need to be machine wound, and you know, as far as I'm concerned, if it works great to make a pickup that sounds great the way that you want it, then that's fantastic. For me, it's just more than sound, and we've kind of talked about this. It's about dynamics and touch sensitivity,
Right.
And that's the thing for me that was kind of, I was trying to get, and I didn't really kind of get that until I played some really good, to my ears, good sounding and good working PAF pickups, and also a couple of Telecaster.
So you started with P90s, right?
Right, and then so I started making P90s for a few reasons. One, I've got like four or five guitars with them, so I know them really well.
Mm.
And as far as a platform for making pickups, it's one of the simpler things. The bobbin has a fixed height versus you know, like a Fender's style, where you can get different height magnets, and you can make the bobbin shorter or taller, and you can do all these. There's all these variables. So a P90 has less variables, so I could take that simpler thing and then just work with, you know, the winding patterns, total turns, tension, all these things, magnets and pull screws to begin with, and start there and say, okay, now I kind of understand with this pickup, with this height, what this does and what these few things
the cause and
do.
effect of it, yeah.
Right, versus also trying to alter all these other things, and like with a humbucker, then you have two of them.
Yeah.
You know, and then with the Fender ones, you can make them taller, and you can have the magnet sticking out of the top, you can have it at the bottom, you can have it beveled, and it does all these different things. And then again, is to just start, you know, just like with making anything, is to change one thing at a time for me. Is just, and then so with P90s, it's very simple, and then change one thing at a time. And then so I did that for, I think I've been making these things for about 2.5 years, and I've made some Telecaster pickups, and fairly recently started doing humbucker pickups, and obviously, and that's kind of why we're here.
Right, and obviously Tyson, Tone Lab, which we have the thing here, will flash up on the screen, and you sell them. And so is that going well?
Yeah, so this is going
Yeah,
well.
because like heavy competition in the world out there.
Yeah, and then and there's a lot of. It's a great time to be a guitar player and be a musician. There's so many options out there, and there's lots of there's lots of good stuff out there. At the same time, I really believe in my product. I spend a lot of time developing it, and I spend a lot of time making it, and I think they're great.
Let's get into the mechanics of this.
Sure.
That was a pretty good point that Bob made about the pickup and the goal of lining the pickup, which is its performance. I think more than just going after trying to duplicate cosmetically what a PAF can look like. In our conversation with him and what he said there, it seems to me, is that he's going for a pickup that responds like what we have found a PAF to respond like.
Yeah.
It responds to your playing.
It's got to have that tone, that it's got to have that magic to it. It's got to have that high end that's not piercing or brittle or too sharp. It's just
Grindy.
Yeah, and there's, we've talked about it before. I don't even know what you'd call it, where it kind of changes tone in your vibrato a note. Yeah, and not all the pickups that we've tried do that. These do.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what we are looking for when we're comparing them to Jane and to Oscar, is those guitars do that. They're expressive. And it's not that they sound the same. All those pickups sound the same, but they all can sound expressive, which we found to be closer to a PAF style. So anyway, that's what Bob was talking about. Now we're going to get into his machine a bit, which was pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
That wire on that sucker. I'm looking at the wire. I can't even see it. He's winding it. Maybe he didn't wind any wire around it. It was like the Emperor's New Wire.
The dust that he sprinkles on.
Oh,
that's what did it.
That was the stuff.
it.
The way they used to do it back in the 50s.
That's right.
Gladys the Winder was sprinkling dust on it.
That's right.
Let's have Bob check out his gear for us. This is pretty cool stuff.
I've already got the slug bobbin wound. Now I'm going to wind the pull screw bobbin, and then I use a different turn per layer for each of those. So now I'm just going to change it. It's not too exciting.
Wire on both?
Yeah, same gauge wire, same exact spool of wire.
What gauge is that wire?
That's 42 plain enamel wire. And then so this guy, this is this idler gear, and then you'll be able to see how this works, which is kind of cool. You know what, first I need to get this out of the way.
So you can see this is labor intensive.
Yeah.
And there's probably a lot of stress emotionally involved in here at Tyson Tone Labs.
Yeah, so that goes there.
So what are these gears doing?
And then so these guys, the ratio, it's important. The size of them isn't that important. What is important is the number of gears, the ratio between each of them, and the differences. And then what happens is, because they're different sizes, this allows them to work with each other, and to be able to swap different ones out. So I just make sure that those guys are kind of
So size
getting
really
along.
doesn't matter.
Size doesn't, it's the motion of the ocean. I've got my bobbin on here. And this is 28 gauge hookup wire that I've got. You probably can't really see it.
You can see it.
The magnet wire, I take a little piece of wet and dry paper, and just about a little section about that long, I just sand off the insulation on the outside, and then I wrap it around. That guy.
Where do you get these bobbins?
Oh, that's a super secret source.
So do you get them from within 1,000 miles of here? Within 500 miles from
I
here?
don't even know. That's a good question. I don't remember.
We're not cracking the code today, friends.
And when I solder, I put a little bit on there, and then on here, and then away we go. And then I just have one soldering station. So I have my winder here, soldering station, and then my workstation over there, so I can just have one soldering station that's in a good position for both spots. And then maybe when I get more machines, I'll do something else. And then I just trim this guy down. And then the other important thing is a garbage pail, because there's always kind of garbage around. So I'm gonna keep things clean, and I just kind of trim him off. And then I use a little piece of this paper tape. And then this gets pulled this way. And then what we want to do is to make sure that this is going to go on the bobbin, and when it does, I want to make sure that this is insulated from the rest of the wire, and it doesn't cut into this when it goes around the bobbin, and then you'll end up with a short or open circuit. So that's there. And then I just cut up a bunch of pieces of tape and have them here. And then the other thing I do is I trim this down so it's not as wide as the inside of the bobbin, so it's a bit easier to put on. And then that goes out of the way. This goes over here.
It's got that little wire on.
Yeah.
I can see it's an HD camera, but that is skinny wire.
Yeah, so it's skinny stuff. And then
Yeah,
I take it, kind of goes like that. And I take it and I bend it. So it goes like this. Then I use a piece of a chopstick. And I put him on there. And that goes down there.
Ta-da.
And then I use a pair of these guys. It goes through just like the originals, goes through a hole in the bottom of the bobbin, and comes out. And then I take a piece of this tape. And then I keep this hookup wire is probably longer than it needs to be, but sometimes if I feel something's funny, not quite right, I'll end up trimming it and testing it to make sure it's kind of where it needs to be, type of a thing. And then so now I just kind of hold it, I hand tension it, and I put just so it doesn't rip on that, I just do a bunch by hand. And then this goes through two of these V-grooved pulleys. And I do some more by hand. I use that thing, but I use my hands too to make sure it's right. And then I had set this already. We didn't see it for what the total turns are going to be. And then another thing I use, and this is like $19 from China, is this tells me how many revolutions per minute. So that the other thing is, again, with consistencies, I keep this the same every time. So I have a little piece of tape on there that tells me kind of where I'm at. But I turn this guy on, and I just get this guy going up to, and I go right about there, about 1,000.
Turning the knob at the same time?
Yeah, and then this is actually a variac is used to control the speed of the motor.
Yeah.
So this actually has a built-in variac that controls the speed of the motor. And then it's okay.
And wow, it's whining it.
And then there it is, and you can see the wire going on.
Pat, he's whining our coil.
And then when it gets to about 1,000 turns, I take some of my magic sprinkles.
Ooh. This is what we came here for.
Magic
It
sprinkles.
says right on there, magic sprinkles.
And I sprinkle some
Oh
magic
my
sprinkles
goodness!
on there.
That's got to cost somebody some money.
Now that's cost extra.
That was
quite
the
an
heck,
extra.
yeah. I mean, I'm sure this is hard to get this stuff.
It is. They spell sprinkles right?
You mean did they spell sprinkles
Yeah,
right?
excuse
Yes.
me,
At
yes.
the magic
Right,
place?
right.
Oh yeah, they got it right. Okay. Well, we'll be back. Well, that's the end of part one.
The end?
That's part one.
Is there going to be a part 2?
Yeah, that's, but only part 2, not part 3. I know it's kind of long, but we really got some cool stuff we want to get on with it. I don't mean to surprise you or shock you or anything. Sometimes Patty just, it goes on for a long time.
Completely befuddled.
Yeah. Well, we want to make sure that people watch the second half.
They will.
Yeah. So turn right now to the second half. Right now. Why are you such an asshole?
I wasn't until you showed up.